Ladies and gentlemen, we're covering Season 2, Episode 12, Baby Cakes. This is the episode in which Pound Cake and Pumpkin Cake are born to the Cake family, the Cake married coupling. And Pinkie Pie's like, I could totally take care of them, and then there's babysitting and Looney Tunes and the end. This is a weird episode to talk about. I gotta be honest. This is a strange one. Not sure where to go with this one. Truthfully. I do have some thoughts. First of all, they are absolutely adorable. And of course, Tabitha St. Germain and Andrea Libman play the two kids, so they do a good job of that. And of course, Nurse Redheart is like, Pinkie, get out of here! Go! Fling. Yeah, adventures. Yeah, I can see that, Cody. Before we actually go any further, I have something I want to talk about. Because there's this bit where he's like, yeah, no, my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was a unicorn and this one was a Pegasus. That makes sense, right? Now, I have, Ethel. I have taken care of babies before, plural. And I do actually intend to share a couple thoughts on that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about genetics. So I was thinking about the genetic thing, and I was like... And what they say doesn't actually make sense. And it's pretty clear that this is an infidelity joke. The thing is, I don't think that should be taken seriously. And in fact, the more I think about it, the less I think that makes sense. So I decided to look into it a little bit. Because I have done a very brief amount of studying about actual real-life alleles. And I found, this is hysterical, I found this. Now, someone said this is a meme, and sure, it probably is, but this actually makes perfect sense. All we have to do is presume the idea that a Earth pony provides E, and therefore is dominant. A Pegasus provides P, and a unicorn provides U. U will always be dominated by everything else. P will always be dominated by E. And if we presume this setup, which actually does make sense, this chart at the bottom here really is all you need to see. If two Earth ponies, who carry the genes of all three species, happen to breed, this makes perfect sense, because you have, as you can see, a very high, a 3 and 4 chance of having a child who is an Earth pony, a 3 in 16 chance of having a Pegasi, and a 1 in 16 chance of having a unicorn. This is actual logical sense-making of how alleles actually do work. And I was actually impressed by whoever put this together. I couldn't find an author. It's mostly just posted all over the place in, like MLP sites. But this is actually extremely logical. Considering Earth ponies are pretty much the most common type of pony we see, and unicorns are one of the rarest, and unicorns are an allegory for the nobility, right? Canterlot. A lot of this actually makes perfect sense. Now, alicorns, we know that alicorns aren't actually parts of genetic. Hi, Sororoxus. We know that they are something that magically happens as a consequence of earning it. That they have to become an alicorn. You're not born an alicorn, right? That makes perfect sense until we have an alicorn born later. Basically, we'll get to that later. But yeah, this is race science. No, today we'll be discussing a game called RimWorld, ! It's a game about trying to make an off-world colony actually work, period. It's supposed to be very brutal and unforgiving, which makes sense, period. We're not actually at RimWorld yet, but we will be doing that later. Anyways, basically what I'm trying to say is all this makes perfect sense right up until you add the alicorns to the thing. So I'm going to just go ahead and adopt this, like this, as my own headcanon going forward, because this actually really does line up perfectly and does fit the existing world building. So, I'm with it. This also does mean, by the way, that certain combinations of other ponies would provide other combinations of other ponies. So, just food for thought. Anyways, moving on. Just wanted to discuss that first. Now, one of the other things that I like here is they mentioned the idea that Pinkie Pie constantly wants to play with the babies. Now, of course, babies are cute and adorable, They're not really known for being fun, though. So I found myself thinking, well, that's odd, until I remembered that we've already heard Pinky's backstory at this point. I would imagine with 100% certainty... Yeah, we were talking about genetics, Arm Devil. I would imagine with 100% certainty that what's happening here is Pinkie Pie, who, remember, basically considers the cakes to be her family, wants very much to ensure that their children basically never have to grow up like she did. We've already discussed Pinkie Pie's unique fixation on happiness and laughter, and how she very much wants to ensure that no one else ever has to have the moments of lack of laughter, that no one else has to go through what she has already experienced. No smiling, no laughing, no dancing. So it makes perfect sense to me that she would be trying to push this idea very, very firmly, even from birth. But it also makes sense because, again, Pinkie Pie, let's put this as bluntly as we can, doesn't understand what taking care of a child is like. Most people don't. That's not an insult. I would actually imagine, again, no insult intended, that most people in chat right now do not actually understand the practical functionality of what it's like to take care of a newborn baby. I know I wasn't until I did it the first time, and it was just like, whoa. Holy crap. I was completely unprepared. You kind of learn quickly, but it is not all fun and games. One of the first things that I learned was that I was... basically, my sleep went out the window, to put it simply. Like, all of a sudden, you get used to taking 5 or 10 minute naps, because so much of your time and attention is focused on someone who doesn't have a schedule. They sleep when they sleep, and they wake when they wake, right? And when they need you, they need you. And, yeah, as Weouds point out, the cakes react like that to any of the needs of the child, because that's what should happen. That's what a parent should do, especially to, at this point, 1-month-olds. Now, I'm not trying to scare any of you. I consider taking care of children to be one of the most positive experiences in my entire life. I guess it was like years ago now, but I remember the first time I ever held my niece in my arms. It was actually kind of like this. You got to make sure to support the head on the back of your arm like this. And she's just laying there. She just fades to sleep. There's nothing that is like that. There's no sensation. There's no feeling that is the same as that. And of course, it's weird to look at it and understand for lack of a better term, the developing sentience that's growing there as they slowly learn and process more and more things to develop more and more. Literally watching droid effect happen over several years is a fascinating process. But anyways, this leads me to Pinky, who of course doesn't understand any of that, like, again, most of you probably don't. Like, most people don't until they have to deal with it. Then, to use two very quick examples of this, there's this bit where Pound Cake is trying to pound his toys, and Pinky's just playing, not reacting to the kid. And then there's this bit where Pumpkin Cake puts the salt shaker in her mouth, and Pinkie Pie doesn't notice. She's just playing with the kids, and it's her mother who has to point out, no, don't put it in your mouth. In short, Pinkie Pie is doing the exact opposite of being responsible, which is, of course, the watchword of the episode. Then, this is the point of the episode. Taking care of someone and being responsible is completely different from playing with them. Believe it or not, I actually think this is a good lesson to teach people as well, of all ages, but especially kids, because the whole idea is, well, how many of you have a younger brother or sister? It's not the most common thing in the world, but you can see why this is a decent lesson to learn when you yourself are young. So, then they go to find a babysitter. It's pretty weird they only ask the main 6, and I get why, and it's dumb. It's just bad television, in my opinion. But, so she goes to find someone, Fluttershy, who is, of course, busy. Please don't be mad at me. Very cute, as usual. Then she goes to Twilight. Okay, logical. Very orderly. She already takes care of a baby dragon. Very understanding, and, she's got the books and knowledge. Okay, so that makes sense. Fluttershy, of course, can take care of things very well. She's already got that protective instinct. She's already been a babysitter, so okay. We've got Applejack, who, of course, helped raise her own younger sister in the absence of their parents, so, again, a perfectly logical choice. And then they go to Rainbow Dash. This is the one that doesn't fit. Why would they go to Rainbow Dash? Like, someone in chat mentioned this while I was still watching the episode, that they would rather go to Pinky than to Rainbow Dash. And frankly, I agree. Even though Pinky has demonstrably been, not a good babysitter. Why Rainbow Dash? Rainbow Dash has her positive qualities, but responsibility and, taking care of things this serious are not on that list. Then they go to Rarity. And, of course, Rarity, again, makes a degree of sense. She's taken care of the kids many times, if you remember. And, of course, she has her younger sister. Rarity just flat out says, nope. What I like best about that is they don't have to explain that, because why would they? Think about her shop and where she's at. Of course Rarity says no. Like, it would be like if I was to take care of a baby right now, I could, but my setup is not kid-friendly. That's another thing you learn, is you learn how to completely change what you have, where, and when, because you have to make things kid-friendly. Especially if you're not watching them like a hawk all the time, which you can't do all the time anyways. So Rarity understands she doesn't have a kid-friendly area, so there we go. Which then leads them to asking Pinkie Pie. One thing I do like is that Pinkie Pie is legitimately overwhelmed by this, but consistently insists she can do it. Like, she keeps being like, oh my gosh, nope, I got this. That's a lot of response. Nope, I got this. And then... Pinkie... Yeah, it grows over time, too, Tazara. Like, it gets taller the older they get. It gets to a point where the cakes leave. And the first thing that happens is the babies start crying. Once again, credit where credit is due. That is exactly what would happen. Separation anxiety. When I was newly introduced to my adorable niece, she was less than a year old. Obviously, she was in the 3 months old, I think, when I first met her. Anyways, she, like all babies, really wigs out when their parent leaves their immediate site of understanding. Not because of any particular reason, just because they're still not at the point of understanding anything. So something has happened that has changed, and therefore they are no longer as comfortable as they did. See, there's ways and methods you can deal with that and take care of that. And it varies. Obviously, over time, they will start to associate with you if you take care of them long-term enough. But the point is, separation anxiety is a very real thing, and basically you reach a point where you just kind of have to accept it and comfort them until they are distracted by something else. That's one of the more common things. You just, okay, I know, you're so sad, you don't understand. It's okay. So, then Pinkie tries to do a comedy routine to cheer them up, which kind of reminds me of me trying to be funny, actually. Oh, I know, Cody. Then, there's slapstick. Slapstick is the one thing that makes them laugh, because of course it does. And then she does a song, which reminds me of me singing. Causes tears, too. She just put... This episode makes the point over and over and over that she really does not know what she's doing. One moment, please. Depends on the game, comma. But in the one we're going to be playing, most likely a lot of people will be dying, period. Like I said, it's very hard, and I'm going to try to keep my colonists as alive and happy as possible, period. Mum's asking if people die in RimWorld. Anyways. I don't like the middle part of this episode. Up until the point where the kids cry and she leaves, that's all actually very good stuff in my opinion. And there's a few moments of good, but basically the rest of the episode's a Looney Tunes episode, which is fine, but just isn't what I'm interested in, So, I'm just going to kind of race through this. We've got, she puts the food in front of them and says, go eat. Eat. Really doesn't work that way. And then there's one nice that I mentioned. There's nice bits. There's this bit where Pound Cake pounds the table, and he's just pounding. He's just trying to interact with things. He's trying to figure out association. So he pounds the table. The food goes up and lands on his head, and he starts crying. That is exactly how a child thinks, because a child does not yet understand cause and effect. They don't understand how actions can lead to reactions. All he understands is that there's now food on his head. it's not his fault, because the very concept of fault is not something that he's occurring. Make sense? Like I said, it's really fascinating to really sit back and consider the developing sentience of children. And once you start to understand a little bit of how their minds are working, you can kind of help take care of them a little bit better. I remember there was a toy my niece had, and every time you hit a certain button, it would play a certain song. And if you hit other buttons, it would play other songs. But in this manner, I could teach her how an action would have a direct reaction, because she could do that. And that's why toys like that exist, by the way, is so they can push something and then something happens. It may just be a little ditty or a random song or whatever, or lights flashing. But the point is they are taking action and a response is happening. So they're learning about that concept. Mom says, sounds like real life, doesn't it? Here's hoping you can keep them alive. I'm going to do my best! Exclamation mark. Exactly, Aethel. I know that sounds strange, but I haven't wigged out around a child in years because I just have so much practice at it at this point, which I suppose is true with most parents, actually. Not that I am a parent, but you get my point. Most caretakers. Unlike Pinky, who flips out constantly because she has no idea what she's doing or why it's happening. Understanding. It's key. It's crucial. Anyways. So, like I said, Looney Tunes section. The bathtub and the flower, and then she tucks them in, and just blah, 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 blah. And it gets to the part where she tucks them in for a nap because she's... Actually, no. Let's rewind for a second. It gets to the part where Twilight comes offer to help. And Pinky is like, oh, thank God you're here to help. And then Twilight unintentionally insults Pinky, and Pinky takes it very hard. This is a flaw in my personality, and I'll admit it, but I really sympathize with Pinky there. It's, yeah. It's like, no, I can do this. I can do this. I've got this. Just give me a minute. I can do this. Stubbornness. Yeah, no, I know how to dig my heels in, and I do it a lot. So Pinky does that. She digs her heels and kicks Twilight out. Yeah, her pride is hurt. Her sense of self is hurt. And this is interesting, but I'm going to move forward a little bit. So she takes responsibility by telling them what to do and assuming everything will be fine now that she's explained it. That is also very well written, because that is an extremely common problem I have seen in many people who are new to taking care of children. That they assume that just because they've laid down the law that now it's done. So she walks out and the crib is empty. Well-written section number 3. How many... I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, and honestly I hope never do, but how many of you have ever lost track of a child for a few seconds? Now, this has only happened to me a handful of times, but it's an extremely unique sensation. It's like panic that magnifies every second. Because at first you're just like, oh, they're not there. Oh, they're not here. Oh, they're not here. Oh, they're not here. And as your mind starts to expand and think of how many things can be going wrong right now, and you start to get a little more frenetic and a little more frantic about trying to find them. It's also, yeah, I was going to say, one of the easiest ways to wake me up, I had to nap. Like I said, you take a little 5-10 minutes. The quickest and easiest way to wake me up when I'm watching her is for her to not be making any noise. That will wake me up like that. And I know I'm not the only one, because I've talked to many other parents and caretakers who have all had the exact same response. You hear silence, you are in it immediately. Like, why is it silent? Why is it silent? What's going wrong? Immediately track down. My own sister, one time I was taking care of her, and we started quietly watching a thing with headphones on. My sister was sleeping at the time. She woke up immediately and raced around trying to find us because it was quiet. So yeah, no, when she turns around and sees the empty crib and starts freaking out and freaking out and freaking out very, very rapid fire, yeah, no, been there. Absolutely understand that. Then it gets into horror tropes. In fact, they even have psycho strings, excuse me, which is just Like I said, this episode loses me as much as it gains me. It's very strange to go through this. And, you know, he's flying. They actually mentioned right at the beginning of the episode that there are surges, that they will have surges. Pegasi will have surges, and unicorns will have surges. And we see that on camera. This is actually something we'll see in the future, too. I don't want to world build too much here. We already did the genetics thing earlier. But I have to admit that... Oh my god, Lord Harriman, how in the world? I've never lost a kid that badly. The worst I ever lost my niece. It was actually my niece. The worst I ever lost her. She was in a room reading quietly and ignoring me when I called out for her. It didn't occur to her to respond because she was so engrossed in the book. But she was just sitting in one little corner of the room, not obvious, behind the bed. Yeah. It took me a couple minutes to find her, and that was the longest 2 minutes of my life. Anyways. World building. This kind of goes back to that idea that I'm totally not stealing, I swear, but Weod's posited the winds of magic idea. And I myself have given the harmonic frequency idea, the idea that there's a pattern of harmony throughout the world. I'm just scraping. Oh, it's this. There we go. Sorry about that. The idea of magic basically pushing through children until it stabilizes to a point where it fits the pattern makes so much sense to me. I don't even know how to explain it. I'm failing miserably at this concept. I guess it's kind of like a mutant in X-Men who doesn't know how to control their powers when they first manifest, right? Except, you know, obviously expressed in a different idea, but the same concept of, and then it kind of evens out over time as they stabilize and become part of the pattern, and eventually getting their cutie mark as a consequence. It's just interesting to think about. And of course, we do see several interesting tricks, including being able to fly and drag Pinkie Pie, substantially heavier than she is, levitating herself. Now that's interesting. I want to come back to that in a second. And of course, phasing through the matter, which is interesting in its own right. But the levitating, the self-levitating. Telekinesis is a surprisingly flexible skill, right up there with teleportation. There's a lot of utility in telekinesis, especially really good and really precise telekinesis, right? We've actually already talked about this several times when it comes to Twilight. But the idea of levitating yourself is a fascinating concept because you can see how it would happen, but it makes sense that it would be difficult because you're constantly having to adjust the spell at every second as yourself are moving. Only a very skilled, very powerful unicorn could manage that, right? Remember that for a few seasons from now. Anyways. Looking at my notes. I gotta admit, children who are having sudden surges of magic like this would be terrifying to take care of. I mean, you've taken care of a real-life human child. Imagine taking care of one that can just go... It reminds me of Incredibles 2, actually, with Jack Jack. To be completely blunt, which actually is the exact same concept. Imagine a baby with superpowers. That being said, the twins... So, Pinkie Pie finally loses it. Now, this is interesting to me. You'll notice Pinkie Pie doesn't win in this episode. In fact, she loses. Now, this is going to sound strange, but I think this is one of the better parts of the episode, because that's what taking care of a child is like. You don't just suddenly get it, and it suddenly works. It's more like you just kind of try to do better each day as you get acclimated to the concept. She has a full-on breakdown, which makes sense. And, you know, she even is terrified at the idea of taking care of them in the future because of how much work and how much stress it is. Because it is. It is very hard work, and it is extremely stressful taking care of a child. There's nothing that's ever been harder to do, for me personally, in my life than taking care of a young child. But then the episode also shows how it's worth it. I might have some time next Tuesday, right? I like that. That was written by a parent, right there. That was written by someone who understands that unique dichotomy of how hard and how rewarding it is at the same time. And I really like how adult that is, how well written that is, because that's the kind of thing I like in my fiction in general. It would have been the easy route to just have everything just kind of be fixed and she's suddenly perfect at taking care of children at the end of the episode. She's not. And she shouldn't be. That was one of the things that caught my attention early on about MLP. There's a few episodes in the future as well that do the thing where the episode doesn't end and everything's just suddenly better. They do that, of course. I'm not trying to give them too much credit, but I like it when they don't. My take. I don't think we had any counters. There's no Rarity Crush, and there won't be for a long time. The episode doesn't really end on a wah-wah. Ponyville wasn't damaged. Books weren't knocked off the shelves. I didn't really see any significant continuity, so I think that's actually it for this one. Which is good, because we're approaching lunchtime anyways. Boundaries, yeah. I'm not going to get into that's a whole other topic, Bregman. You ever see a brat child? It's probably the brat parents' fault. Just saying. Anyways. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording.